And for most, especially men in our society, releasing that conditioning of, I'm worthy of love just as I am, just because I am. I was born with a birthright of infinite love, unconditional love. Because as we grow up, we get conditioned more and more that love is not infinite. It's very finite, and it's very based on a scale of how much you deserve it. What have you accomplished? This is why you're asking people questions. What do you do? That's part of that conditioning, because your worth is defined by your actions rather than by you just being you.
If insight is a destination, curiosity is the map. I'm Clayton, and this is Making Insight, where we connect the dots between growth, creativity, and what drives us forward. Welcome back to Making Insight. I'm your host, Clayton, and on today's episode, I'm joined by my guest, Sasha Faynshteyn. In short, Sasha is a transformational coach. And in between now and my formal introduction of Sasha towards the end of the episode, he's going to share personal experiences from his life that highlight him being both a student and a teacher, of digging into one's own subconscious to ultimately become more self-aware and the best version of one's true being. I really hope you enjoyed this episode because I sure did. So let's jump right in. I think I mentioned to you while we were texting last week that I used to do an outline with some of my guests. I used to have some sort of framework on what I wanted to talk about, and what I've benefited most from this podcast is that this podcast is making the conversations that I'm having off the podcast so much more extraordinary. I feel like I'm connecting with other people more when I just have regular conversations with them, and I'm finding myself in conversations where when they're done, I'm like, that's what I want a podcast to be.
Yeah.
If that could have been recorded, that's what I would want. So going into these now, there may be times where I experience some struggles in sparking something spectacular to talk about in the beginning, but two people coming together to connect in whatever best way is at that moment. So that's what I hope for this to be. I thought you'd understand. So
100% aligned with everything is that. So yeah, I mean, let's let it naturally flow. And ultimately, that's the way I communicate in general. Like, even in the work I do, something that I do professionally, I don't create an outline for myself, because I've learned after a while to trust my intuition to guide me in the moment to exactly where it's supposed to go. So oftentimes in the moment where I'm leading clients somewhere and I'm not sure where it's going at all. And then when it gets to the end, it's like, oh, okay. Looking back, it all made perfect sense to guide him exactly in this way to get to this point. Like, it all aligns and it all perfectly played together without me even realizing. And maybe if I try to consciously interfere and create some sort of blueprint outline, that actually wouldn't come across natural and it wouldn't lead to results that it led to. So it's ultimately, it's probably going to be a big part of the conversation. Intuition is something we are innately gifted with, just like other animals. Wolves, we all know they have intuition. They know where to go. They know where not to go. We are the same way. Just a lot of things in our lives are conditioned to make us distrust our intuition or shut it down.
What are areas in our lives where it's safe to trust the data? It's safe to trust the facts and stray a little bit away from intuition. And I say that from somebody who is trying to actually move closer into what you just said, back to discovering my intuitional powers.
Well, notice the languaging, even in the way you ask the question. Language is such a powerful tool. Most people, and by most I mean 99.9% of people, don't realize that the things you say are not accidental. The way you say things are not accidental whatsoever. It's programming coming from your mind and the way you interpret the world. It's not actual reality. It's your perception of reality. What most don't realize is what we believe we perceive, meaning what you're seeing is what you're choosing to see and interpret. Now, a lot of it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels almost like it's been passed down to you or given to you. And you're like, well, I just have to learn to figure out how to deal with it. And one of the ways that we learn how to deal with it is outsourcing it outside of ourselves, and outsourcing it to data, outsourcing it to what others learned in that specific area, so that we could say, what's the purpose of it? It's to say, well, I don't have to trust my own voice. I don't have to trust my intuition. I don't have to trust internally to what's the right decision or what is the next decision. I could just rely on something that's done by others. That's safe. Because using that word safe is very very big clue. Why does it need to be safe? What is the safety you're looking for? And does safety have anything to do with the actual thing you're doing or an internal state that you feel is missing?
How do you examine safety from an internal perspective or an internal means of self-discovery, from an inner awareness?
It's a deep question. And it's something that, as I've experienced my life, has led me down this journey path of discovery that it's much more intricate than I maybe originally have thought or realized. So when we are born, it's at this point, it's been proven that the first time you feel deeply unsafe is exactly at birth. The child, it's the first traumatic incident that you have in your life is when you're born. When you're taken out of the warmth and comfort of your mother's womb, and then you're thrusted out or pulled out, and all of a sudden you're experiencing this drastic change in temperature, noise volume goes up 10 times, the feeling of cold air, being pulled by uncomfortable hands or gloves. So all of this is the first traumatic experience that you experience as a human being, that we all do, no matter how smoothly it goes. So at that point, your sense of safety is the first time you consciously experience what it feels like to be unsafe and deeply unsafe. And from that moment on, you build a system within to consciously try to prevent yourself from experiencing that again. And the issue with that is it makes sense logically, or it makes sense on some level, like, hey, I need to build a system of protection to keep myself safe. The issue is that the sense of unsafety is within you. So it's like you're building guardrails to keep the sense of unsafety inside of you rather than keeping yourself safe. You're making sure that from then on, there's going to be this constant sense of unsafety that I need to do something to protect myself. And it's all inside of you.
When we use the term safety, is that to say that leaving the zone of safety results in unsafe environments, or it's just creating new levels of safety? I don't know if that question makes sense, but I feel like if we're leaving safety, our mind may perceive that we're going into something unsafe that would be labeled dangerous, but that unsafe environment perhaps may not be dangerous.
Well, so in the modern world, specifically in modern society like we live in the United States, the idea of safety is illusory, meaning it's not real. And by that, I mean, you actually are pretty much safe at all times. And by that, I mean, what is the original idea of safety versus unsafe? It's the survival going all the way back to prehistoric times. It's literally survival. You could get eaten by the lion or the tiger. That's actual safety versus not being safe. So you have to be on constant alert to not get eaten or not get killed by maybe hunters from, tribe next to you.
Mm-hmm.
Where we live, we don't experience actual sense of unsafety maybe ever in our lives. I'm talking about physical safety here, where our survival is at stake. If you're unlucky, maybe once or twice in your life, where you will actually experience that at the highest level, where your life is a danger at any moment. So what ends up happening instead, and what has happened in our society, is we have moved that sense of, okay, fight or flight, which is natural survival, and we have adapted it to our environment, which is we're not dealing with actual threats or danger, but we perceive it as such. So this is why what you're referring to is illusion. It's illusory. It's in your mind, the idea that I'm unsafe. What are you actually unsafe from? Now, if you go deeper and investigate that question, which you'll likely start getting answers is, well, I'm unsafe from this feeling. If I do this, or if I say something to my partner and I'm really honest, maybe he'll say something to me like, I don't want to be with you anymore. And then what is that going to wake up? Now, are you unsafe physically? Nope. You're going to be safe as a whistle. Nothing's going to happen to you physically. However, mentally and emotionally, you will have the same sort of feeling of being unsafe as if you were about to be attacked by the tiger.
I see. Could you provide an example from your life in the past where you first discovered this and it surfaced?
Well, I got lucky because I grew up in Soviet Union back when it was still Soviet Union. So I was born in 1980 in modern day Ukraine, and I grew up in a pretty rough environment. So I got to experience as a child before ever coming to the country in 92, the actual unsafety where my fight or flight kicking in was a natural response based on the stimulus. This wasn't imagined or something that could emotionally hurt me. It's something where I could have physically gotten hurt or worse. So I got to experience that. And then I got to experience the living in this country where after a while I was not experiencing actual danger, but I was still perceiving it as such. And for me, the awareness started coming in actually in my mid-30s. So it took me a while, and it was as a result of being in a traumatic relationship, my first serious relationship with a partner who herself was, how do I say this? She was living to her pain body, which is another way of saying she had this energetic field within her or trauma, this other kind that she stored that probably was going back before before she was even born. And so after a couple of years together, without me experiencing any traumatic events with her, it was actually the greatest relationship I ever had. We moved together and then it just uncovered and this mask came off, which let out all the pent up energy that was always there. And that is what in turn triggered that in me. The deep, profound sense of fight or flight. I'm at risk. I'm in danger. And it was emotionally based. And this was when I first discovered, like, I don't know what's going on, but whatever this is going on, this feels out of control. I don't know what's happening. My thoughts are going nuts. And ultimately, I am not in charge of anything. So what it created is this sense of profound horror, like threat, like as if I'm being in a horror movie at all times. So that was my first experience with it.
And I feel like the typical human being, when faced with like traumatic experiences or like problems like that, we're conditioned to go into the world and find things that will band-aid those challenges. What triggered you to stop, pause, and say, maybe this is something deeper inside of myself that I need to self-explore? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, what you're referring to self-soothing behavior. And this is something that it's conditioned into our subconscious, basically generationally going back hundreds and thousands of years, where your mom tells you, hey, when you fall, get up and just dust yourself off and you just okay. Just realize you're okay. Like, don't feel the feelings. Just keep going. You got this. Same thing with your dad. Be tough, be strong. You could do this, overcome pain, overcome hurt. Don't cry because tears are weakness. So there's so much conditioning in terms of trying to ignore and avoid what you're experiencing. You taught to bypass it or ignore it. For me, the blessing was, even though that time I did not experience it as a blessing, is that I had no choice. And I know it feels like it's crazy to say, but at that time I felt and I believed I had no choice, which is a big distinction. We always have a choice, but most of us in a lot of situations don't believe that we do. So at that time I felt that I had two choices, which is one, because the pain of living in that state was far too great and did not have benefits enough for me to want to continue, because I literally experienced life in terms of continued like mental prison of anguish, pain, hate-filled thoughts, just running on loop energetically, where I felt I was not in charge of any of it. It was happening to me, which is the scariest feeling, that the belief is it's happening to me. I mean, so the message that, and as I realize now through this work, is the message sent to our conscious, which is in charge of our programming, that everything that's happening to me is out of my hands. It's out of my control. So I am basically just floating and things just coming at me. So that's a terrifying feeling when you believe that to be true. So at that point, I had two choices, either end my life. And I thought of it very pragmatically. It wasn't even, I didn't even look at it as suicide. It was like, well, why would I continue living in this pain, in this state that continues ongoing pain? Nothing is fun. Everything is miserable and it feels absolutely terrible just to be awake. Or I go in, dive in deeper, or dive in off the ledge and just go in there, and I have nothing to lose. Ultimately, this way can't continue. So if I go this way, I get to at least figure out if there's anything worth continuing. So for me, it was a beautiful, at that time, kind of push that I needed, that for many doesn't come across in their life. So they kind of continue living their life in this low level of numbing and low level pain throughout, where they sort of survive and they sort of continue on. They clock in, clock out. They just have the kind of relationships that work, but not really. And everything feels numb and dull and full of dissatisfaction. For me, having that opportunity to experience extreme dissatisfaction and extreme pain, it forced me, or at least it gave me the impetus to find something different, to see if there's an option or choice to connect something different. So that's what really drove me into this work, is basically self-survival, self-preservation.
Between that journey of then and now, how do you deal with waves of dissatisfaction today, and how you've developed yourself? What's your process?
Awareness is the first step. That's the biggest difference. That's what I learned almost immediately, that I did not have any awareness. My understanding was the thoughts are happening to me, feelings and emotions are happening to me, and there's not much I can do about it. Trying to tell my mind, hey, I'm happy or I will feel good, was completely dismissed because on an unconscious level, which I didn't realize at the time, my mind said, yeah, you are miserable. You are a piece of shit, so you're supposed to feel like this. So there's no way I could overcome it by letting it know or telling it to feel different, which is what made me feel so helpless. But first up, what that awareness that like, oh, I have thoughts running. Oh my God. Like it's actually after a while, I started realizing it was like a report that would get activated and like somebody would press play when something would trigger into action. And that I would hear this continuous, almost like a chain link of thoughts of these super deeply negative pattern thoughts that were telling me like the most meanest things you could think of. Like, oh, you don't deserve to live. You're like the biggest piece of shit on the planet. Like no one is as terrible as you are. You're literally the worst. Like you're broken and something is deeply wrong with you and you cannot be fixed. Your parents were right about you. Everyone's right about you. So it would be something in that pattern of darkness.
Where do you think those negative thoughts are derived from? Or is that a developed ego? Is that a sub-personality?
Well, Clayton, I feel very comfortable answering this question through my own basically self-discovery, self-work, and it is realizing after all this work that it is conditioned into our unconscious. The issue is, which is why for most people doing therapy, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnotherapy on its own, why it doesn't work or it's very limited. And what it does is simple. It doesn't go to the root of the issue. So we believe, most of us do, that our conditioning came maybe when you were very little. Maybe it came when you were even like, couldn't remember, you were 2 years old. However, and this is my realization from personal work I've done, meaning personal relief work, and that I've dealt with dozens and dozens of clients, is that most of it is rooted beyond this. And it's interesting because as soon as I say it, the first thing comes up is like, oh, woo, oh, look at me, previous life or whatever. And I was as cynical as it gets. I mean, my family is Holocaust survivors. My grandparents literally Holocaust survivors. So it is ingrained almost in not almost, in my DNA to be cynical of everything, to see there's something behind every corner, that everything being told to you is a setup for something to get here. So, and which is another conditioning. By the way, just to realize cynicism is not natural. It's conditioning. So a lot of people don't even realize that. When you say, oh, I'm cynical, I want to make sure, this feels like it's a load of BS, or they try to break down everything instead of intuitively seeing, does that work for me or does that align with me? It's conditioning. It's a survival mechanism that gets taught to you at some point. Because as a child, you're not a cynic. When you're 3 years old, you take everything for what it is. When you're 5 years old, you believe in Santa. You don't go, well, Santa doesn't sound real. Well, how could that be true? Only later on, when you get conditioned through your life by circumstance, by other people saying, you need to judge everything. You need to look at everybody as if they're going to try to hurt you or try to get something from you. So with that being said, the conditioning gets passed down geologically to us, and it also gets passed down to us as a species. And it's easy to understand with other animals. When wolf cub is born, it doesn't need to be taught how to be a wolf cub. Yeah, there's certain things it picks up on from its mom, but most of the things are instinctual. Why? It gets passed down. It's a survival. It's like literally the DNA of a wolf. What does it take to be a wolf, right? As a human, it's the same thing, meaning we get passed down DNA from previous generations, from humanity in general. However, here's where the issue lies. As you know, history of humanity is littered with what?
Suffering,
Violence, death, trauma, intense, insane levels of trauma.
but it also includes love, joy, peace. So would you say we're then searching for or sorting out the differences between the two and ultimately like building awareness to be able to choose one or the other? Are you familiar with the level one theory?
Yes, is that the one which you just spoke into? That like the choice?
Kind of. I believe the life of one has like 7 dimensions. Human beings make up the third.
Yeah, I've seen a podcast on it. Yes, like there's 7 different dimensions.
And I'm just very briefed in some of the basics of it.
So I'll tell you through experience of it scientifically, and meaning working, obviously myself, working with clients and friends that are actually go from one state to a completely different state without ever returning to the previous state. that I know what's possible and what I've seen experience in my own eyes, in my own experience. So that conditioning that you're referring to, I do believe that even underneath all the pain and trauma of humanity, regardless of where it comes from, and I do believe that it comes from from the space of not being able to express yourself or not being able to go to what's painful. And when you repress or suppress what hurts, it builds up and builds up until it explodes. So think of humanity being conditioned throughout forever, basically, since it's an induction to deal with pain and suffering that way by trying to suppress it or repress it or push it down. So that's been the go-to for dealing with it, which has resulted in all the trauma and pain and suffering and wars and destruction.
You just mentioned seeing that build up to the point where it explodes. What are some behaviors or examples that showcase that exploding in a human being? I'm sure it's not like a combustion, but it's more like a mental or emotional explosion. How does that show up in some people or even yourself?
It could be as small as lashing out at somebody, yelling and screaming. Had a client that used to punch holes through walls constantly because he had murderous level of rage that felt like in his mind it was combined with energetically feeling like he's going to explode. And the mental thoughts, I want to murder this person. Not like in a, fantasy way, but in actual reality type of way. So to get to a level of actual murder of impromptu or murders in the moment, like let's say traffic stop, right? And something happens on the highway, you hear about it all the time. That's the definition of somebody's pain body reaching a boiling point, and something's going to trigger into action. So, that's how you get road rage. That's why it's called road rage. And people get interviewed afterwards, people that murder people, and they're on the state. I mean, they're being prosecuted, and literally the defense is in that moment, that person was not himself. In that moment, something took over where he completely blacked out and he wasn't even present. And people, of course, dismiss it and say, oh, that's BS. They're just trying to get him off. But reality is, it's actually true. And not that it takes away the gravity of what's done or that it somehow dismisses it, but it explains it, or at least it lets you know where it came from. It's not that this person is the evil being that's here to murder people, but that's actually how far it could go if it's unchecked. You go as far as harming yourself, which is looked at as, think about the difference, because harming yourself and to the point of suicide is basically self-murder, right? You're murdering a human being. It just happens to be you. So there's no crime to it, right? But we say, oh, it's mental illness or the person was going through it. But somebody doing that state and projecting outwardly, it seems, and it as constitutes a crime, but in reality it comes from the same place. The place of this is what has to happen because at this moment, I am not in charge of what I'm experiencing. This pain and suffering is so strong that the only way I could live in this exact moment or react is by letting it out, either towards myself or towards somebody else. So which is why this work is so important, because it quite literally saves lives.
I have another question from that. So it sounds like a lot of those releases are reactionary. And I swear I just heard a couple days ago somebody talking about being mindful in traffic situations where if somebody cuts me off and I immediately honk on the horn and try to get their attention, that's coming from a place of reaction. But if before I honk on that horn, I build some awareness as to why am I honking on the horn, or maybe if it's even sitting behind somebody at a light turned green, they're not moving, you honk on the horn telling them to move. If you take a second to just be like, what am I rushing for? Why am I honking on the horn? Okay, I actually do believe it's been a reasonable amount of time. I'm going to honk on the horn to just notify that person that it's time to go. Building in that awareness allows you to switch from reactionary to discovering that you do have a choice. Hey, I gave them a modest amount of time. I think it's time that I honk on the horn. Is there a difference between that and like I even think back to the person who was punching holes in the wall. If he builds an awareness and he's like, I have energy in my body that I would like to release, and the way I'm going to do that is by exerting energy into the wall. Is there a difference between being reactionary there and just going after it, or building some awareness and then deciding to do it?
Well, great question. And awareness is the muscle. Here's the thing about the situation you're describing and being proactive rather than reactive. The issue with what you're describing is if you're in a state, in an emotional state that goes beyond logical thought, applying logical thought does not work because you're completely in an emotional state. So it's like telling a bull that's on rampage and like, hey, slow down. This isn't safe for you or anybody else. And basically the same thing. However, there is a way to build that muscle. And this would be like, it's the starting point of awareness. And that is one, taking full accountability for how you feel and doing that when you're not in the red alert state. So for example, when you feel irritation, when you feel frustration, right? Those seem like minor states of negative emotion or negative thought pattern. So instead of just dismissing it or projecting it, which means blaming somebody else for it. So for example, let's say perhaps somebody cut you off and you didn't go to the level of, I want to chase him down and try to murder him. You just like, that's fucking annoying. Like, look at this fucker. That right there is where you get to stop and say, hold on. I know one truth to be certain. If I'm triggered, it's 100% mine.
I believe that.
And that's the reality, because every trigger you experience has nothing to do with the other person. And that's a hard truth to swallow for a lot, because what it does, it places the onus of change or onus of interpreting it differently on who? You. And why most people don't want to do it, choose not to do it, even though it feels complete, pain, miserable, and angry, it's simple. There are payoffs. These are mental and emotional payoffs. So what are the payoffs in being violently angry? You get to express yourself. No one can shut down your voice. I finally get to tell the truth and get to tell everybody how they're a piece of shit instead of hearing in my own head telling myself that I'm a piece of shit, right? Two, I get to be right. Hey, this person cut me off. If they didn't cut me off, I wouldn't feel this way. I would feel different. I would be calm. But they cut me off, so they're in charge of me feeling like this. So they're responsible. Meaning what? I'm not responsible for my actions. I'm not responsible for what I'm saying and doing. It's not up to me, which is another huge payoff because it gives you an illusion of freedom. Hey, at this moment, I could actually be this and not have to worry about how others perceive me or that I have to be responsible for anything. So the reason why we continue on with destructive behavior is not just that we have conditioning to do it. We created payoffs or beliefs attached to it that I need this behavior or I need to feel this way. It's actually for my benefit. So in this work, what I do is the first thing before we can even start any work, two things get to happen. The person, the client, whoever is choosing to go into it is saying, I am 100% responsible for how I feel and how I interpret everything, regardless of what anybody does and says or done to me. If you got raped at 15 years old and you choose to say, hey, how can I be responsible for getting raped? I'm a victim. Guess what? You just created an identity for yourself that you're choosing to stay with. And then there's a payoff in it, even though in your own mind, you might feel like, no, how can it be a payoff? I'm a victim of this and I feel horrible. There's no payoff. It's a terrible thing. Mentally, emotionally is the payoff. The payoff is you're a victim, which at least gives you attention, gives you some sort of affection that replaces the idea of love that you don't feel, that you feel you're not worthy of. Then at least you get to be right about I'm a victim and everybody else is here to oppress me, make me feel bad. And ultimately, I'm the hero because I get to overcome all this pain and suffering that no one else has to deal with. So this is, if you're not choosing to be in that state, and once again, it's a choice of it happened to me, so I am not responsible. The method you're sending to the unconscious mind, which is in charge of our programming, which means in charge of our beliefs and perception, is that I can't change this. This happened to me, so I'm not responsible. The only way I could live is by reacting to it. So the only way I could live is by reacting to being a victim, by reacting to trauma, and by identifying with it as if it's me. And in our society, it's very prevalent. And in fact, sadly, a lot of most therapy is based on basically not only permitting it, but encouraging it and allowing the person or facilitating the person to stay in that state, which isn't good for them. Because ultimately, if you're in a state of I'm a victim and you're constantly feeling and reliving your own trauma that you're connecting to, that you're identifying with, choosing to identify with, I want to make that very clear. Choosing to identify with. Then once you do that, then you're basically living the reality that you're choosing to create. And ultimately, you're choosing your own pain and your own suffering. And so in order to begin the work of, you know what, I'm ready to let go. I'm ready to actually live life of fulfillment and still live a life where it feels like I'm actually living it, where I'm alive, when I feel passionate, where I feel motivated, inspired, where things happen to me and it's okay. Or I could deal with it in the moment. I could deal with the trigger, what comes up in me. And then I could look at, hey, what's coming up for me? I feel angry. Going back to what we're saying, when you take accountability, it's just that little difference of saying, I'm fucking angry. He pissed me off, to saying, I feel angry. It's my shit. I know it's coming from somewhere within me. And I already conditioned myself because I already told myself before I got angry that next time I get angry, I know 100% it's something from within coming up to the surface. My dad isn't the one pissing me off. It doesn't matter if your dad tells you, hey, yeah, we wish you were different. Ah, man, but you just came up this way and you just like the whole life, we just had to kind of deal with you being like this. That's still your trigger. That's still your shit because you're choosing to interpret it, even if it's completely reasonable. You're choosing to interpret in this way to make yourself a victim, to make your dad or your parents the oppressors and make yourself the hero in the story where you get to overcome their shit. So you get to hold on to the story that I get to be angry at them forever because that's what motivates me and inspires me to work hard. So you see how these strategies get created to keep the beliefs in place.
I do. And what you're saying connects with what I'm hearing from you, connects with me a lot. And I'm extremely fascinated by this type of work. You actually mentioned a couple sentences ago in that identity. That's the identity came up. I have even yet to introduce you yet, for the most part. Sasha, who do you identify as, and how does that person show up today in this present world on this podcast?
It's so funny because as soon as you say that, if I could feel trigger inside my own mind, I could only imagine if anybody listening to it or anybody hearing it in their life, somebody saying, who do you identify as, how immediately you feel that trigger coming in of like, oh, what is he referring to? Is this your identity? Am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I supposed to be, do I need to get a tagline or different verbiage? So it's hilarious to hear that how society, modern day society, has conditioned us to even hear that question and get triggered immediately.
It's something that I consider a lot because for 28 years of my life, I would introduce myself to people and ask, what do you do? And I would identify that person with what they do. But the past 12 months is all about being for me. And I feel like that's not the question I believe is right to ask people, even though 99.9% of people, that's the question that's normal for them.
Well, it's, I love it. I love the question. So it's interesting because I'm coincidentally or not coincidentally is about to start working or reworking my avatar, which is another way to say my ways of being. Because the one I did 2 years ago was after I had breakthroughs done on me, and breakthrough means finding deep emotional and mental beliefs and then negative patterns and releasing it before realizing I have a blank slate and I get to keep who I really am outside of these beliefs that I carried with me as my identity, right? My identity before was not good enough, worthless, never going to make it, never going to have money, never going to have real love, or whatever love I have is always going to come with pain. So that was my identity.
Never going to be on the Making Insight podcast.
Obviously not. So that was my identity. It's truly what I identified with. So that question is very much deeper than you think, because that identity is something most people create for themselves without realizing they're creating it, right? So let's go into identity real quick. Even for yourself, you have a limited belief, something that comes for you a lot, like a story in your mind that starts playing, something goes wrong or something doesn't work out. If not now, maybe before. Think of like, man, like I used to constantly think that about myself. I would have like something goes wrong and now I'm like, fuck. Well, this is who I am. Well, this is what always happens to me because of this and that.
Yeah, I feel like what comes to mind is that what nobody would want to hear what I have to say. No, let's even go deeper into that. I don't have anything valuable worth sharing. I don't have anything valuable worth communicating.
Let's go deeper.
The experiences in my life have no depth. They aren't going to connect with other people, and there's no point in sharing them. Nobody else is going to learn from that.
How's that problem?
It's a problem because I get a whole lot of excitement and joy from communicating and sharing stories, not even just about my life, but the stories that I hear from others. And I get excitement from being able to engage in dialogue with other people. Therefore, it's a problem because when I think that, it results in like silence. I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to share.
So
What are you hearing, Sasha?
with clients, I would ask more questions to get them to get to the deeper root. But since, for the purpose of the podcast, we'll do a shortcut, and that's from doing this work a lot. So what I will tell you back is what I'm hearing you say on a deeper level, meaning on unconscious level. What I'm perceiving underneath the surface level issue, which is what you're describing, the surface level belief, right? That ultimately people don't really care that much about what I have to say. Then we go deeper because underneath the surface level issue is a deeper issue. And you tell me if it resonates with you. And if it doesn't, toss it out. Just say, no, that doesn't connect to me at all. So this way we could get to the deeper root and you're understanding the identity and where it comes from. So what I heard you say without using those words is that ultimately my voice doesn't matter, or I'm not sure if my voice matters.
That connects. Yeah. Resonates.
Am I worthy to have a voice? Why does my voice matter? Why would my voice matter? I'm not worthy of being heard.
Are you asking me that?
Well, that's what I'm hearing from you on a deeper level. And you look within and say, well, does any of that resonate? Or did it used to resonate with me more stronger?
It has and used to resonate with me a lot stronger. And I feel like the work that I'm doing on myself is allowing me to build a little bit more awareness. And I would say the way that I am working on blocking that belief or reshaping that perception is by understanding that my voice is God creating through me. Therefore, if I were to limit myself by that belief, then I am limiting the ability for God to create through me.
So what you're describing, which is what many people experience in their life, and it's the way they're able to rewire their conditioning or their identity through that conditioning, is connecting to something outside of you that you then bring in mentally, emotionally within you to rewire your mind to a different reality. Religion, specifically in our country, Christianity, is a big way of allowing people to do that, or having people rewire their own mental and emotional state into a different state. We see it all the time. Born again Christians, we hear it, right? Like, I believe in Jesus Christ now, so everything I perceive is through that Jesus is in me, and I flow through him, and he flows through me, which is extremely powerful. And in a way, that's actually how this work works. So it's funny because a lot of people see it and like cynics, right? And they'll say, well, this is a placebo effect. God isn't in you. What kind of stupid ass things that's even say? You're not God. You're just born human with flesh and you're going to die. So what God will flows through you, right? And that's their condition. That's their perception. And it's limited based on what they've learned throughout their life and how they learn to perceive the world based on their own conditioning, not realizing that it's not them being unbiased or neutral. It's actually come from a place of their own understanding of the world, of their own limited capacity to comprehend how the mind works, how emotions work, and how it is all interconnected, and how you are in charge of how you feel, rather than, no, something else in charge of me. And if you choose to take on that power of saying, you know what, there's a higher power flowing through me, the message is sending to your unconscious, which is ultimately in charge of how you perceive the world and how you show up in the world, is saying, you know what, you're 100% right. There's a higher power flowing through you. And whether it's a placebo effect or not, it doesn't matter, because the difference means nothing. If you believe it to be true, it is true to you. And that's what most don't realize, is that placebo effect is real. Your mind, if it believes in something, it creates from that point. If it believes that you're not worthy of stuff, if you're not worthy of having abundance or having wealth, guess what? It sees you as worthless. So the conditioning is, I am worthless. I'm not supposed to have any money. Everything that I do in the world to confirm that story. If you, on the other side, believe I am as abundant, as prosperous as it gets, I couldn't get more abundant, prosperous if I tried. It's flowing in me. I already have it. I don't care if I'm as homeless in the street. I have it flowing through me. Guess what happens? You're creating it on every level. You might not have millions of dollars, but you're creating a state where you might as well have all that money and more, because people don't realize that money isn't the way to create the state. Your state is what creates that feeling of abundance from the money. You are abundant because you're creating that, and you are having the power of God flowing through you. because you are conditioning your own unconscious into believing that to the point where it says, of course, I have the power of God in me, and I get to create from that. And I give you an example of how real it is, because a lot of people just don't understand that this is actual scientifically proven to be true. You know, Iceman. Have you ever heard of Iceman? Wim Hof?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's like, I feel like the few awakening points for me in just like a mental and wellness type journey 6 years ago or so.
And so the doctors, scientists were convinced that he had some kind of abnormal gene, mutated gene. No, they did, because they couldn't understand how this guy is able to survive in conditions where a normal human would die 999 times out of 1,000. Not only is he able to survive, he's thriving in it. He's not experiencing the cold. His body's not shutting down. His mind is not shutting down. So they did extensive tests of him, and they found him to be completely normal. There's nothing exceptional about him. And why? Because he wanted to prove that there's nothing exceptional about me. The only thing that's exceptional is me choosing a state of mind to be exceptional. Is me saying, I get to be in charge of actually creating the state of being a superhuman. Because most people don't realize that's a possibility that exists, which it absolutely does. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be like him, but you get to be a super version of yourself if you make that choice.
That sounds like real magic to me.
It is.
Yeah.
And this is part I got to experience firsthand, to go from a person that not only doesn't think he's worthy of anything, I didn't even think I was worthy of living, to the point where I live my life in allowing and guiding others to see that for themselves and create that for themselves almost instantaneously. Where they go from societal, I'm not worthy of anything, to, oh my God, I am the biggest creator, and I am creating this moment and going forward from then on from my place of being who I am. I am this magical human being.
And I feel like the work you do is not you sitting down with somebody and giving them all these things, answers, material. It's working with them to help release the things that aren't serving them, so they could, that's the release work. It's letting go of things. And even going back to why I asked you, who do you identify as? Because I believe all the things we do and all the things we label as achievements and accomplishments stack up across our lives, and we attach those to ourselves as a part of our identity. And something we did 20 years ago, we still identify as that 20 years now in the present moment, when that may not be serving us anymore. So like, I feel like even going back to how we started this whole podcast, coming out of our mother's womb, we are taught so many things that we're supposed to believe. We kind of reach a point in our life at whatever moment that is, that it's like, all right, what do I need to start reevaluating what's true? Not by taking in more information, but it's letting go of all this information we've been given to find what we want to define as meaning, truth, peace, happiness, authenticity.
Yeah. So let's jump into the weeds a little bit to show you basically how conditioning works. And it's pretty easily explainable. And I could show you an example. I use some version of this example with pretty much every client. So let's take your belief that your voice, like your old belief that you're now reshaping, and you actually don't feel attached to, or feel like you're letting go, that my voice matters actually. That old belief that my voice doesn't matter, that no one cares about my voice, was coming from somewhere else, or was coming from within, but it wasn't mine. I just happened to somehow associate with it. So how does that happen? This is not exactly how it happened, but this is how it could have happened. And ultimately, it doesn't matter when it happened. Meaning it could have happened in your lifetime when you were little. It could have happened in your father's life, in your grandfather's life, or it got passed down to you through humanity's voice of getting shut down. But example would be simple. Let's say you're 5 years old, you're at a table, right? And you sitting with your mom and dad, and you want to tell them a story. Hey, mom, hey, dad, this happened to me. And let's say they're just had a fight. They had an argument, and now they're not in the mood whatsoever. They're in their own state. They're triggered, anger, pain. I'm not enough. Is this even worth it? Why do we even have a kid? Maybe if this kid wasn't here, we wouldn't be together and we'd have such a happier life, right? I'm just giving an example of where their mindset could be at, how deep and dark it could be in the moment. You don't know any of this. You're a 5-year-old kid that just wants to share with his parents about how amazing experience he had earlier today. So you say, hey, Dad, I did this, and that. And your dad looks at you and just says, not now. And in that moment, what happens? And here's where our mind is so imperfect and why it creates conditioning. So we have two basic parts of mind that we need to understand, which is conscious and unconscious. Unconscious gets labeled subconscious as well. Doesn't matter about the word. The main thing to understand is our conscious mind is very limited. That's our logical mind. That's the mind that we perceive the world through at all times. It's our sense of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, right? So, and that's how we perceive it. The problem with conscious mind is it's extremely limited. It could process about 126 bits of information in any moment. And you have about 2 billion bits of information happening at all times. So what it needs to do is compartmentalize the information. Otherwise, you will have a breakdown. And this is how our mind constantly works. So what it does, it deletes, distorts, and generalizes information every single moment. So what you perceive yourself as reality is not reality. It's reality of your own distortion, deletion, and generalization. So the way it works in that moment with, let's say, your dad saying, not now, you're not hearing not now. You're hearing not now, but what you're perceiving, especially through his emotion and his state, you're hearing, I don't like you. You need to shut up. Your voice doesn't matter. Nobody wants to hear from you. You see how I got distorted in that moment? And that distortion passes through your conscious mind, through this mind in the moment, and goes right to your unconscious, which is like a giant vault that carries all the information through your lifetimes, from multiple lifetimes ago, from humanity itself. It's like a general storage of who you are. This is how you operate, is through your unconscious, through this giant storage. However, in that moment, as you distort the information, you pass the message to your unconscious. Say, hey, guess what? Dad just taught me that I don't have a voice. I don't deserve to have a voice because even the people closest to me that love me don't want to hear from me. So why would anybody ever want to hear from me? Why would a stranger or somebody I barely know, or anyone for that matter, want to even know what I have to say or what my opinion is? So from that moment on, your identity becomes, my voice doesn't matter. I'm not worthy to have a voice. And then you live your entire life either fighting that belief, trying to prove it wrong, trying to push it down, repress it, numb it, find other ways to do it. So for a lot of example, medians, perfect example, majority of them have that. You're not supposed to have a voice, or you don't matter. And they express it by basically saying, fuck you, I'm going to use this as an impetus or motivation to be the greatest comedian and just have my pain be my expression. So that's an example of people using it as motivation. However, ultimately, is it worth it? And the answer is probably not, because if you're still miserable on the inside, then what's the point of all that success, even if you get it as a result of fighting it, repressing it, or proving it wrong? Because then you still feel like your voice doesn't matter and that all of it is a lie that could be taken away one day. And you feel constant nagging sense of pain or not enoughness. That's why people that are uber successful, uber talented are drinking themselves to death, drugs, etc., and just basically self-destructive behavior.
What you just said makes me think about your comment on abundance earlier, understanding what abundance truly means. And I feel like I had this conditioning that abundance meant having all of my desires. But I also feel like what abundance really is for me is not having what doesn't belong. Therefore, what I do have is meant for me. So if I don't have $1 million, I'm abundant because that wouldn't be serving me to my most authentic self. Is that an okay way to frame that, or a belief that you think makes sense?
Well, to pick up on your own language, remember we said language is intentional. Everything you're saying has a reason. It's not accidental. So whenever you find yourself using words like don't or not supposed to, I want you to realize that your unconscious does not interpret negative language. So it only hears what's beyond it. So even if you say, I'm not supposed to have it, it just hears supposed to have it. So if you find yourself, I don't feel bad, it hears feel bad. So you want to use empowering language because ultimately it ignores the negative part of the sentence and only the actual meaning of it.
I see, and that actually makes a lot of sense. I was also just listening the other day to somebody speak about how every word we say, we could say up to 10,000 words a day, has a positive or negative energy to it. And for those people who've been 90% of their day using language that's like that, negative, that's what's going to continue to fill up your life. And if you can reframe that language, you're going to be sending more positive. Essentially, language is an affirmation, and you're going to be sending more positive affirmations.
Yeah. And it's also powerful just to notice or understand that when you're using, let's say, negative or disempower language or move away language, right, which is using a bunch of negatives, it lets you know that there's stuff there. If you keep using and going there, it's something from within sending you a message to remind like, hey, there's stuff to work out here because I have this thing, for example, around money. So you're referring to money. You're saying, I'm not supposed to have $1 million. Right now, it's interesting because on one end, it's great to feel and believe like, hey, I don't need money to feel abundance or to be abundant. It's amazing. Or we could look at it and also from the other side and see, is there charge around money? Meaning, because money itself is neutral. It's not positive or negative, but is there charge? And this is spoken as first-hand experience for myself. I've realized that I used to have a lot of charge around money that without realizing it, I thought money was extension of evil, extension of something bad. We came to this country as immigrants, my whole family, and we had basically nothing. And then, my family pulled themselves up and were able to accomplish incredible things financially, before I even became, of age. I felt that it created actually separation in our family. I felt like the relationships actually grew apart, or at least that was my interpretation as a result of money, kind of like, well, now you're in this sphere, you're at a higher level. So I'm here like low levels. So we don't really communicate or we don't have that closeness. And now money and status becomes more important than actual relationship and love and connection. So my interpretation of money was it's bad for you. It breaks up families. It creates discord and it creates disconnect. So what that means is going forward, I created a story around money that not only I don't deserve money, I'm going to stay away from it because it's somehow going to ruin my life or do something bad or negative as it did in the life of my family or my interpretation of what it did. So then I had to charge around money. So of course I was not going to be able to create anything because I was avoiding it because I saw it as something evil and something that's destructive. So this could send you a message saying, well, am I also creating blocks in my life of saying, well, yeah, I'm very abundant, but would I be able to create more abundance or create more in terms of what I could do for others, for the world, and elevate my power if I chose to tap into the abundance, not just on a mental, emotional side, but also as available in terms of energy exchange, in terms of money. So it's always interesting to look deeper because a lot of times we don't realize that we're dimming our own light because of beliefs that we sort of ignore because they're like, okay, I don't want to go there. I don't want to kind of look at it because maybe it is there, but I'd rather be where I'm at because this feels safe and comfortable.
I would say I entered a phase where I wasn't aware of my desires, and that transitioned into me, becoming a little bit more aware of my desires. And then I reached a phase where it's like, I need to limit my desires. And more recently, I was opened up to the idea that if we have awareness for our desires and we aren't afraid to actually expand those desires, like that could be positive. I guess I had this belief around expanding on our desires is almost greedy, egotistical, selfish. But if we expand on our desires, we're opening ourselves up to that creator I talked about, divine master, universe, God, whoever you define it as, exist with expansion through you. Expanding on that desire allows that creator to continue creating through you, and you don't need to limit that. I don't know if anything I'm saying
that makes a lot of sense.
Connects. There's probably better ways to say it, but
no, that's another self-judgment. I love it. But let's play a little game. I'm going to ask you questions, and I want you to give me instant answer. And by that, I mean instant.
All
not
right.
filtered, not processed. Whatever comes out of your mouth, even if it makes zero sense, give yourself permission. I'm going to say the first thing that comes out of my mouth. Okay?
I give myself permission.
The first thing that comes out of my mouth, like literally, like, oh.
Okay.
And I'm just going to ask you serious questions, and you just tell me what literally first thing that comes up, and we'll go from there. It could be short answer, literally a couple of words. Yeah. So what I heard you say is you don't really deserve to have this huge expansion. Why do you feel you don't deserve it?
I don't feel I deserve it because I fear evil. I feel evil.
Okay. Feel evil. You flipped up, but it's there. Why? I heard you say I feel evil or feel evil. Do you feel like there's might be some evil in you that you've been denying or that you've been trying to get around your life?
Yeah. I believe that I have awareness over what I define as good decisions and bad decisions.
And now you're logically processing, and that's why I was asking you to give me the first answer. The first
Okay.
answer was your conscious one, where you said, I feel evil and I
Okay.
fear evil. Okay, but let's keep going. So you're, I feel evil or I fear evil. And what happens if you really let that evil out? What could happen?
Hurt people. I hurt myself.
So because if you let the fear out, I mean, if you let the evil out, you could hurt yourself, you could hurt others. So what I'm hearing you say, in order not to let the evil out, you have to keep it small. You have to keep it contained. You have to make sure that everything's okay, because if you don't, you let the evil out. And what happens when you let the evil out is you hurt people, you hurt yourself. So see, that was me communicating with your unconscious. Your conscious try to filter it through halfway in there, is like and try to logically reason it away. But at the core, that's the belief. I have some stuff in me that is scary, that is evil, that is dark. And my whole life, I've been working on creating this identity that I'm light, that I'm pure, that the God is in me. However, there's a dichotomy or discord within that I know there's some evil in there. I could feel it. I could hear it. So I heard it my whole life. So how can I let the light shine through me and really open up and reach for the heights or reach for the heavens when I have not dealt with or have not accounted for this evil in me? And how can I be this pureness when there's that darkness in me?
Yeah, I feel like most of my life, it's suppressing that fear of evil rather than releasing it in a healthy way without hurting anyone.
And this is a great start. That's the awareness. So this would be part of the work that we would do in terms of discovering deeper what's there, right? Because there's a nice facade on the outside, because I'm sure you're a nice guy, and I'm not, it doesn't diminish you. However, the idea that I have evil in me creates this really dark, ominous side, or this discrepancy of like, well, how can I proclaim myself to be this amazing, abundant person with the light of God shining through me when there's also that in me? And that's where the release work comes in. It's realizing that what you're releasing is belief that something's wrong with me, that something is like, I must be, something's wrong with me, or something is bad about me if I have this in me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it in me. And then once you're able to release that, you realize that your darkness turns from this repressed anger and rage to actually passion, to saying, you know what? Now I see myself capable of creating this profound shift, not just for myself, but for thousands of people, for millions of people. I'm able to now not just experience abundance internally, but abundance in terms of financial abundance that I'm creating, with which I could also create not just for myself, my family, but for so many others, to help them learn about themselves, to help them love themselves exactly as they are, right? Because think about the discrepancy of what you're saying. What you're referring to, the light of God is in you. And I'm assuming that you're referring to that God, specifically Jesus, the teaching, even if it's not Jesus, but God, that loving, accepting of everybody as they are.
It's possible. It's interesting because I use the term God there when 99% of the time I actually use the term universe.
Universe.
And I did grow up Catholic, but I do not really associate with any.
I grew up Jewish, but I don't really associate with any religion. It's more spirituality. I use actually Jesus a lot as an example, because at its core, taking out all the other stuff around it, the teachings are very spiritual at its core. Right? It's
I do
about
believe
loving
that.
everybody,
Yeah.
loving and embracing everybody exactly as they are, not for a version of themselves or a better version of themselves. That's the whole idea of hanging out with lepers and prostitutes, so that he saw them absolutely as equal. Discrepancy of like, you need to prove yourself to be worthy of love, which speaks to conditioning of humanity that we learn generationally, which is ultimately this, which you're referring to right now, that I need to deserve to be this. I need to deserve to be worthy of my own unconditional love. And the problem with that conditioning is that nothing you'll ever do will make you fully feel deserving. So what that creates is this drive to, I need to constantly keep doing, keep going in order to feel worth or more worth. And the relief that the freedom comes in is saying, well, what if I am as imperfect as I am, worthy of unconditional love, or worthy of my infinite love right now, going forward, without needing to let go of the evil? And the evil itself isn't really evil. It's perception that I have this dark energy, dark thoughts, means I must be evil. Something bad is in me. Now realizing it's just human. So it's a really profound conversation. And for most, especially men in our society, releasing that conditioning of, I'm worthy of love just as I am, just because I am. I was born with a birthright of infinite love, unconditional love. Because as we grow up, we get conditioned more and more that love is not infinite. It's very finite, and it's very based on a scale of how much you deserve. What have you accomplished? This is why you're asking people questions. What do you do? That's part of that conditioning, because your worth is defined by your actions rather than by you just being you. So as you see, it's all interconnected. There is no accidents. Even in you asking that question was all interconnected to deeper conditioning, deeper baggage. And here's the cool part. The stuff you believe about the evilness inside, it can be released just like this. And then once it's released, it doesn't mean that you never have negative feelings or you never have like a thought come across. But now you stop giving that thought the charge. Or now you no longer associate with it as if it's something means that I am evil or I am bad. It just means, oh, I had that thought. It's like a star flying through the sky. It's simple as that. And then you're able to unlock, because when you lock away your dark side, your shadow, because of like, well, I don't want it to come out, so I need to come across as a nice guy, because I bet everybody in your life thinks of you as the nicest guy around. Because even your voice, even your energy, the way you carry yourself is almost, I would say, neutered. And the reason why it's neutered is because the dark side in you that you see as something bad is actually extremely powerful. And that's where passion gets hidden. That's where your power gets hidden. That's where your voice gets lost sometimes. Because when you lock away something bad, what you actually lock in away is everything that goes with it. And that energy itself isn't evil at all. It's your perception of it.
Believe that. I hear everything you're saying. I understand everything you're saying. And I have seen what you're saying show up recently in my life, being able to use my voice in more powerful ways to get my message across without fear coming off as evil.
Yeah. And here's the thing, even they said without fear is a normal basic emotion, and it's a big part of being human, right? So even saying
it's a basic part of our intuition, right?
Yeah. It's our survival. I mean, literally we have to survive. Fear was something that allows us to see where danger is and how to navigate it. So even that idea of like fear is bad, seeing like, no, fear is welcome. It's actually my guide. There's a simple question I teach my clients in anything they do, but in just the way they are, that allows them to live in that freedom. And if anytime you face with a decision and you're not sure what to do, or maybe you do know what to do, but you kind of don't want to do it because you're like, oh. So the question to give yourself that clarity is like, what's in between me and my intuition? And that question is either as simple as, what am I resisting or what am I avoiding right now? And you'll hear it loud and clear. Well, I'm avoiding doing this because I know if I do this, then I have to confront and have this conversation with this person that I don't want to have, because they're going to get triggered. Now I'm going to feel triggered. I'm going to feel, and I don't want to feel that. So then, this is what I get at, because that's going to resolve it. That's going to actually break to the surface and allow me to go deeper with it. And no matter how that person interprets it, it's actually going to create that freedom for me, that peace, that I could be myself authentically, and that I'm creating that rewiring my mind, that I get to have a voice because I'm creating that voice. Or the second way to ask the same question is, what is the most painful outcome that I'm avoiding right now? Because
I like that question.
Because pain is a friend. Pain is our ally. What we don't realize as humans is we think that our job is to avoid pain. And trying to avoid pain is what leads to suffering. Pain is ultimately actually our friend. It's there to explore. It's there to bring to the surface whatever's underneath that we're ignoring, that we're avoiding, right? So when you're feeling like deep emotional stuff, you're like, oh, I want to shut it down. Let me do things so I don't have to think about it. Ultimately causing suffering, because it's still there. It's just now maybe it's at a number levels, but it's ongoing. It's continuous. And then things keep happening, keep triggering, and you keep growing it, because the message is sending to your unconscious that the reason why I'm avoiding this pain is because it's real. It must be painful. It must be hurtful. It must be deeply, darkly untouchable, because otherwise I would go there. When you just say, hey, if something hurts, if something's painful, I get to go there because it's obviously there for my own benefit. It's there for my own resolution. It's a blessing. Then you see that pain, and the moment you experience it, you actually see it as a blessing, and you rewire your mind to say, when I feel pain, something happens on the outside that causes pain or triggers that. What a blessing. What's the lesson here? I get to go there. I guess I get to feel it. I get to experience that. It's okay for me to cry and feel sad, because I'm actually not avoiding it. And by embracing it, it gives me the resolution, because then the light of the universe, as you put it, the light of God is in you, says, thank you for embracing your own power. Like, this is actually here for you. This pain was here as a lesson, as a teacher, not as an enemy.
Who would you consider one of your teachers?
My biggest original influence was Eckhart Tolle, in terms of just awareness that I'm not my thoughts. And that was the biggest shift that I needed because I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that was even on the table. I associated my thoughts so deeply, profoundly that that voice that would yell at me, and I mean quite literally would yell at me in my own head. I felt like that's what I deserve. That's what I'm supposed to hear because I am that what he's telling me that I am. Being able to disassociate from and become the observer of my thoughts completely transcended my life to being able to take the next step of go deeper and say, okay, now if I know it's not real, how do I get there and how do I get to let go? What are the ways for me to transcend it so that I can create the thoughts or create the beliefs that I want or choose rather than beliefs that's already there that I had nothing to do with or that I didn't consciously know I was placing there or had there in the first place. Outside of that, I'm open to literally everything I see. I feel that what the most important realization for me was that I am just as much of a student as I am a teacher in everything in life. Allowed me to perceive everything in a different light, whether it's my own 8-year-old or it's a person in the street or a dog that's, a homeless dog in the shelter. There's a learning, true learning, not just to say it's a learning, but actually if you let it in, if I allow it in, I could feel that deep learning. I learned from my dog what emotional intelligence is every single day, what infinite unconditional love is every single day, what it means letting go in the moment means, right? Because as complicated as our minds is, it's also our biggest obstacle in life to experiencing the joy of just being alive, of being present with every moment and seeing it as for that. Instead of like, well, what could be better? How can I look toward the future and think about how it could be better? And how can I stop thinking about the past, thinking about how bad it was? So like that, I see learning in everything because ultimately that's what it is. And by learning, it's just as much about letting go as it is about actually obtaining new information, as you spoke to in the very beginning of the podcast.
Is this release work a leading passion of yours? Do you feel like that is a present purpose in your life? And if so, do you believe one's purpose in life is ever changing?
I never, interestingly enough, fully dove into the what is my purpose in life question. I know in a way that was my own avoidance to like going deeper and going, well, if I go in there, who knows where it's going to take me? What if it's the answer is like, I don't have a real purpose? Or my purpose is not to have a purpose. I think ultimately what it's come down to for me, it's can I find a purpose in the present moment of showing up in my life? And then when other things open up, I get to connect to it. And when things open up in a way that's letting me know there's stuff to be released on my end, I get to go there just as much. Like I did release work today with my partner. I'm lucky enough, but luck is the wrong word here because she's a reflection of me. And it's not to toot my own horn, say, oh, look how amazing I am. It's just what it is. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just your partner is a reflection of you. The people you hang out with the closest are a reflection of you and where you're at in that moment, where your mind state is at, what you're about. You connect to people that are on the same frequency with you, which is why when I was in a relationship with a person that was extremely toxic and in her own pain body and constantly projecting hurt and pain, I needed to have that relationship. I needed to be in that relationship because that was my mirror in the moment of what I was trying to avoid my whole life and running away from, which is my own deep inner trauma, pain, and baggage that I was constantly avoiding to the point where I didn't even know it was there.
So it was in you, but it was showing up in your partner, right?
She activated what was already there. She connected to me. She connected to me to show me exactly where I was at. And I will tell you this. I tell the story people so for them to understand how real this is. She was my first serious relationship. And I think we'll even close out with that just to understand that this is not like, hokey pokey. This is what it is, what it looks like in real life to connect energetically without realizing that that's what's happening. Before her, for a decade plus, well over a decade, I was what people call a fuckboy. And I took a lot of pride in that. I could get women left and right. And I mean left and right. It's basically what my full-time job is, being able to get women to manipulate, to get whatever, not even try to get them, to not have to lie to them and not tell them like, oh, you got to be my girl. Nothing. I just could get them just by using simple charm and by basically using simple psychology in order to get what I wanted at the time. Obviously, I was operating from ego and not enough, which I did not know. I was not consciously aware of it. At that time, it made perfect sense to me to operate from that frequency. So for 13 years, all I was doing is being this guy that could just click his fingers and just get wherever he wants. So I randomly connect randomly connect with this girl in a poker room. At the time I was full-time professional poker player. And the way I got to the poker room at that time was completely out of my element. It was like 5 a.m. I went with these guys that I barely knew. I have no idea why I trusted them. They're like, hey, let's go to the different casino. I started playing in this table randomly, and I was just like, I want to go sit next to her. Like, something drove me to go sit next to her. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. She was drunk as a skunk. She ended up actually asking me to go to a hotel room with her, which I was like, she was staying in that hotel. We went upstairs. We ended up doing nothing and slept until morning. And in the morning, we connected at sex, and she was leaving. And I remember having this very conscious thought in my head. This is the most annoying person I've ever met in my life. I'm not even really attracted to her at all. She's not my type, quote unquote. The sex was nothing I felt connected to. There was no redeemable qualities. Her personality was a complete turn off to me. Everything was just like chalk on nails, or nails and chalkboard. Everything. Get her out of my life. Get her out of my sight. I couldn't wait for her to leave. In my head, I was like, as soon as she walks out, I'm just going to be celebrating because I never have to see her again. She left, and it didn't even take 10 minutes before I felt this longing that I've never experienced in my life, ever. I was like, I have to see her. And I could hear myself thinking, I go, what does that mean? Why would I want to see her? There's nothing about her that I liked, that I was attracted to, that appealed to me, nothing. And it's not like I had a shortage of women or that I was worried about. Absolutely not. The opposite. But I was innately drawn to her in a way I could not describe to you. It was something that felt completely out of my control. It was like, I need to see her. I need to be with her. And it's the story of our beginning of our connection, of our relationship, of our 5-year relationship. So when I tell you that this was innately that I was drawn to her for a reason, for her to uncover all my stuff, this wasn't on a minor level like it happened. I could remember to this day that feeling of innate magnetism towards her that made no logical sense whatsoever. But that's what happened because she was meant to show me. She was sent by the universe, by God, by whatever you could say. She was here to teach me a lesson, to get me to go deeper where I wasn't able to go on my own. And I had two choices, whether to learn from it and dive in and do the work and be here with you right now, or take my own life and basically learn that lesson in next life. And that's how we're here right now. So yeah, this stuff is deep.
I'm grateful that she showed up at that time.
And for a long time, I obviously blamed her, created stories about being a victim. And only after doing the work, I realized how incredible she was for me. That I am beyond grateful for this human being. And that wherever she's at, I'm beyond thankful. And I'm hoping that she's learning whatever there is to learn for her so she could experience that joy of life that she deserves. Because make no mistake about it, she deserves it just as much as you and I.
Absolutely, for sure. I am curious. You mentioned you met her at a poker table. Poker is an interest, I would say an important staple in your life right now. And the reason being is because poker is a mirror for you. And it's also a mirror for some of your clients. Am I correct?
Absolutely. There's very few things we can do in life or anybody can do in life that is as much of a power-sized mirror as poker.
Tell me about it.
You're not faced with decisions where thousands of dollars at stake and instant either gratification or trigger into like this painful voice of you're not enough in a moment like poker. So your mental emotional state will show up and come to the surface instantly in a way that no other profession can really do. Maybe stock trading is similar to that. This is instant, like this is where I'm at. So poker is a wonderful mirror and it does not let you hide. It does not allow you to hide from who you are or how you feel about yourself in that moment. So yeah, if you could master poker long term, you can master anything in life because of how powerful it is as a reflection. So in a way, that's what draws people into poker is what they think is desire to escape reality, because that's the way I perceive poker is the way I could do something that I'm good at, that I don't have a 9 to 5, and I could just have fun, travel, just live my life without caring the world or any responsibilities. And I realized that poker is actually the opposite. It's the most profound mirror and the most powerful way to realize this is exactly where I'm at. Yeah, so poker holds a special place in my heart because of that.
Are all of your clients poker players?
I work with anybody. All my clients are men, and I don't think that's accidental because I do feel affinity connecting with what masculine baggage is, meaning I understand on a deeper level that conditioning that we receive as men on this earth, that conditioning of you have to be strong. Emotion is weakness. You have to be tough. People have to rely on you. You have to prove yourself constantly. Like all those things that are very particular to men feel very aligned with, meaning understanding of it because I grew up in it. I'm as conditioned into it as hard as anyone ever could be. So I could relate to that. And ultimately, I do feel it's part of my purpose is to be able to be that with masculine on this planet, especially considering as we look around how much destruction the masculine is bringing to this planet when it doesn't realize what it is and what the power of it being actually is.
You do play poker yourself for your own learning and personal development, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's literally my last two sessions is the main reason why I asked my partner to do release work with me today. And it's been coming up for a while, but it was like hidden. But the last two sessions, I was like, I don't know what state I was in, but that state does not work for me. Actually, it does not work when it comes to like poker and obviously life as well. It's connected to life. So let's go there. And like I said, it's a constant learning. I am just as much of a student as I'm a teacher. That's the relationship I get to have with myself and with the world.
So we did this podcast in reverse. Please give me an introduction of who you are, who you work with, what your profound being is at this present moment on the podcast.
I'm Sasha Faynshteyn. I'm a transformational coach. I work with clients of all different backgrounds, mostly men. And what I do for them is I guide them in finding out what is the innermost, deepest beliefs, stories, and emotional and mental baggage that they're holding on to that's basically making their life worth a lot of suffering. They're missing joy, pleasure, fun, and just creation in their life. So that's what I do. And I also work with poker players and I play poker. And me and my business partner, Dave Richards, have our own venture called Poker with a Purpose, where we are streamlining it to make this available to thousands at a time instead of individual clients.
I've been on those calls and I always attempt to show up to them as long as there's no other priority in my schedule. I definitely think they're important and worth giving my own attention to. I enjoy them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Dave is a great reflection of me because we work together. We've been parallel in our work. And so his experience and what he's creating is a reflection for me.
What I recognize is I see in Dave the student. So you both are showing up on these calls as a guide, but I see Dave putting in a lot of work on himself to be able to show up in that capacity. So
absolutely.
To me, that feels safe and comfortable, I guess.
I wish you knew Dave when I met him, and to see the transformation he's had in his life, it would be beyond profound. He was such a deep, dark place of self-hatred. And I mean, self-hatred is the only accurate way to describe it, that he literally drove away every relationship into abyss, and he was looked at by everyone he knew as not enough, as not worthy, as somebody you wouldn't want to associate with. I had multiple people tell me, I don't know why you're friends with him. People that were his friends. So to come from that place to the place of not the profound self-healing and self-love, but being that instrument for others, for the world around him, that's on Dave. He made that conscious choice because he could have continued on with his life in the same pattern and become whatever his conditioning told him he's supposed to be. So he's just another amazing example of what we are capable when we just make a choice of like, you know what, I'm choosing to create a different reality. And now I get to welcome in all the guys in my life to help me with making that choice a reality.
Well, I'm entirely grateful that I've gotten to have two incredible conversations, one with you and one with him. Would like your actual background a little bit more, tracing back to coming over from Soviet Union.
I am Jewish from Eastern Europe, Ukraine. My family lived through a ton of trauma. My grandparents, Holocaust survivors, they lost something like 95% of their family in the Holocaust. So there's a lot of trauma being carried over that got passed along genealogically, etc. So I got the privilege and the wonderful blessing of being the participant of the trauma and realizing that it could be super powerful if I choose it to be. So releasing it does not only allow me to live in peace, but allows me to help others realize that they have that ability in themselves and I could guide them or I could help guide them to that freedom that's always in there.
Best place for people to get a hold of you.
Just reach out to me in my email, sashafaynshteyn@gmail.com. I also have Instagram. It's funny, my work is word of mouth. And I take pride in that. I mean, we're building out something big with Dave, but ultimately people referring others tells me that the work is real because that's how I get my clients. Is people literally reach out to me through my phone, through my email, and Instagram. Sashi at Poker with a Purpose on email. I'll send to you. You put it there.
This hour and 40 minutes of talking with you has brought up some intriguing thoughts on things that could potentially be worth discovering in a conversation with you off the mic. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
some release
I could
work.
feel
So,
it, and it was intentional. Because I could feel it energetically where I was taking you to, and I could feel it in your energy that there's stuff that's asking, ready to come out for you to let go. So, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
I wouldn't have been opposed if you would have dug deeper, but I also respect you maintaining the course of podcast so we can talk about some other topics. So,
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for hosting me. It was amazing.